I'm just looking for what's the next opportunity that's going to push what I do just a little bit further and push me to grow so that I can push my students and my colleagues to grow.
Welcome to Inspiring Teachers, a show bringing you classroom tips, motivation, and stories from successful educators. Join Tavis Beam and Danny Hogger as they explore the why of teaching.
Welcome to a special New Year's Eve 2018 edition of Inspiring Teachers. I'm Danny Hogger. Tavis Beam is getting ready for our New Year's plans, but I've decided to make one more connection for the day on this whole theme of doing one more thing every day to feel productive, and I felt totally refreshed doing these episodes the last few weeks. And today we're being joined by Becky Schnekser in Virginia. Becky, how's everything?
It's great. How's everything where you are?
Super, super good. I mean, we were just talking a little bit before we started about break and getting ready for the next term of school. And, you know, I've just found it so enriching. Like you said today, you've made a few connections on Twitter. And could you give everybody your Twitter feed so they can find out more about you later today?
Yes, absolutely. So my Twitter handle is just my last name, Schnekser, but I'll spell it for you. So it's SCHNEKSER. And then my website and my blog are Expedition Schnekser. So if you at least get close to that spelling, I'm sure that Google will help you out and find me.
Isn't it great to have that little bit of extra assist? I was reading your blog this morning and you are astounding. Your philosophy is totally inspiring, and I'm so glad that you would join us today. You talk a lot about how learning occurs everywhere and all times, and that you're trying to get your students to know and understand and feel empowered to make a positive difference in the world. And I feel so much about, as a history teacher, that that's also what I'm trying to do. And could you tell us a little bit about some of the exciting adventures you've had, including the Galápagos this year and Belize next year? How did you come to those opportunities? And that's a lot to go on, so I'll let you roll on that.
Yeah, so there's a lot. Yeah, I just a little over a month ago, I got back from Galápagos. I am a 2018 Grosvenor Teacher Fellow, which is a partnership between National Geographic and Lindblad Expeditions. And so when you apply for this fellowship, they will send you on, if you're accepted, they send you on expedition somewhere in the world. So I was lucky enough to be sent to Galápagos to study endemic species. That's what I chose to study, since, I mean, when you're in Galápagos, you might as well study the species that you won't find anywhere else in the world. So I just got back. Yeah, just got back from doing that. And there was a teacher that was with me, Samra Zaweldi from Canada. She is a middle school science and music teacher. Fascinating, inspiring. She's amazing. So we went on expedition together to Galápagos. And just before that, in July and August this past summer, I was in the Peruvian Amazon with Andrés Russo from National Geographic. He's a geothermal scientist. And we were studying thermal river systems in the Amazon. So, and basically a thermal river system is just a really hot river. So what we were doing was looking at one river in particular that he discovered. It's been well known by Amazonians for hundreds of years, but to the science world, we didn't know anything about it. We didn't know it existed other than legends from history books, or really from literature, just stories passed down from families and years. So in 2011, Andres went on a whim to see this river, see if it existed, first of all. And I met him in 2014, and I just happened to connect with him. I was drawn to his passion and his story of getting into science. And we became friends. We did projects back and forth with my school. And I just decided to write a grant to go do field research with him. And it was a shot in the dark. Honestly, I had no preconceived notions that I would even be selected to do the work that I wanted to do. But I felt like this is where it all ties in. I felt like I'm a science teacher and I teach elementary school. So I teach 3-year-olds to 11-year-olds, but I've never been in the field. And so a lot of teachers of especially younger students, we haven't been in the field to do things like an archaeological dig for history or field science for a science teacher. So I just had this crazy idea. You know what? I'm friends with a scientist. Let me invite myself on an expedition with him and see if I can go ahead and do that. And I was. So I got that grant. And then it was a couple months later when I applied for the Grosvenor Teacher Fellowship. And it was just another one of those, there's no way this is going to happen for me, but I'm going to try. It worked out. So So that was just, my idea was get in the field,
Mhm.
figure out what science looks like in the real world other than in a lab, because everyone, students and I would say people, believe that science just happens right here in a lab, 30 minutes, and then you're off. But that's not all science, and that's actually the majority of science doesn't happen that way. So I wanted to experience field science so then I could bring it back to my students. And that's really, I believe in authentic work, application-based science especially. And so I'm doing my darndest to get the experience myself and then bring it back to my students.
That's so super. It's a big shout
Yeah.
out to you and your work ethic. I always try to take the mentality that I'm already not doing this. So those shot in the darks can be really exciting, because if you have enough plates spinning, eventually one of them's going to catch and you just never know. And look what the adventure that you've been on. So I commend you for that. Tell me more. Like, how was the trip?
It was amazing. So going to the Peruvian Amazon, well, first I was going with a friend that happens to be a scientist. So you can't go wrong, right?
Right. Yeah,
Or
that's a
the friendship
plus.
runs. It was, it was a 50-50. It ended up strengthening our friendship. So that's good.
That's a
Um,
plus. Yeah.
but yeah, exactly.
You don't want your hypothesis to be that relationships are challenged when moved into difficult situations. No,
That's
that's
right.
cool.
Maybe they are, but we ended up fine. So it's totally fine.
Cute.
But it was the Amazon was great. I had never traveled to South America before. So going to Peru, I flew into Lima, and then we flew to Pucallpa, and then we got onto trucks to get into the jungle, which is basically 3 hours of like the worst roller coaster you've ever been on. That's kind of how it was. But it was exciting because then you could see the landscape change from kind of like city and super dusty, and then as you got further and further into the actual jungle, and then eventually to the rainforest, you just see the vegetation just get thick and dense and taller, and then you see things kind of moving leaves off to the side, and you're like, oh, hope it's not an anaconda. And if it is, it's going to be an epic picture. Um, so that was amazing, and just being somewhere that I had learned about or just listened to Andres tell me about for 4 years was absolutely amazing. I literally, when we pulled up to our base campsite, the person sitting next to me in the truck, I grabbed her arm, and we had just met 24 hours ahead of time. Like our team was, with the exception of Andres, I knew no one, and there were about 12 of us. So new friend right beside me, I just grabbed her arm and I just like, I gasped and I was like, oh, I can't believe it. You could see the steam coming up from below where
Wow.
the river was. And it was just one of those just epic moments. Like I knew it was going to happen, but when you actually see it and you can feel the steam, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm there. I'm in this place that I had only dreamed or, joked like, hey, one day I'll go there. But it actually happened. So the jungle it was really exciting. It was super hot, super steamy, very limited diet there. So there were a lot of new things. We ate a lot of quinoa and lentils, not a lot of protein. So, you're sweating, you're getting rid of all this water weight, and then you're not really replenishing it super quickly, or as much as we would here. So it was just a completely different place. We stayed in tree huts that had these big mosquito nets, and I'd never stayed under the protection of a mosquito net. We saw tarantulas, saw lots of moths and butterflies, and did a lot of water sample work. I did a lot of 360 work. And that's kind of what I've taken to when I go into the field. I'm helping collect data and analyze, but I've made it a focus to kind of look at 360 opportunities for virtual reality and augmented reality. So I spent a lot of time playing hide and seek with the 360 camera, which is challenging, but super fun. So
How about that? So it's almost like, it sounded like your description of moving into the wild as almost a journey back in time, yet you're carrying with you technology of the future. How amazing is that, even to stop and think about? That's pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah. And now that you pointed out, that's exactly what we were doing. It was surreal, but peaceful too. It's in the middle of the jungle. I just did a blog post about Galápagos, but connecting to the rainforest. And I just feel like in the jungle, and when you get to these remote places where you're traveling back in time, you're not seeing other people. It's just you, it's nature, a little bit of technology, and a whole lot of science. It's so incredibly peaceful. Yeah.
I love too that you can carry these stories to your classrooms, and that your classrooms often go out into nature and do work. I like reading about the trout generating and science that you're doing. What I like about that though is you just told stories about being open to other people, getting outside your box, getting outside your comfort zone. And when students see their teachers doing that, they can really open their own mental box of their own potentials in the future. That's what I find especially inspiring about that story. So I thank you for sharing that part of it with us.
Yeah.
And you do a lot to take your students out into the field. What are some of the things that you've done in 2018 or some of the plans that you have for 2019?
Oh man, where to start?
There's a lot, and you can read about it on your blog as well, which is fantastic.
Yes, yeah, and I love that, because then that helps jog my memory too while I'm blogging, and hopefully helping other people and inspiring them to just try stuff and just get outdoors. Every year I do that trout project. We get little trout eggs every fall, and we raise them all year until the spring, and we release them 4 hours away in the mountains of Virginia. So while we're preparing for that, though, we have to study what's 4 hours away in order to replicate it in our classrooms. So the students, they're not necessarily always outside in the field, but they're trying to figure out, like, how do we replicate that here for the trout so they're successful when we take them out. But what they do have to know is water chemistry, and what a great pH level is in different situations, and what salinity, and what dissolved oxygen, dissolved CO2. So what we do is test all kinds of water sources around our school, or if I can't physically get my students to a location, I bring the samples in, or I'll say, hey, I know you live in such and such place. Can you just get a cup of water, bring that in, or, as much water as you can, get that in here, and we'll do first thing in the morning. We'll do testing. We'll put it under a microscope to see what microscopic life is hanging out in that water, and compare it. When I do get them out into the field 4 hours away, then we'll take our equipment there and we'll compare it. So we document the whole time. When students are younger, it's a lot harder to get them to these other places. Like my third graders, we're studying landforms, we're studying caves and biodiversity inside caves. So you'll see a blog post about, I made caves in my classroom because I can't take third graders out into a cave. It's just not close enough. It's not safe enough for them, maybe older kids. So I just set up in my classroom, I made cave systems where they had to crawl in with headlamps. But I purposefully put different biodiversity sets in each cave. So they had to go to each cave, and they had to write down, just like we do in the field. We go in with a notebook and you write it down. I saw 3 brown bats. I saw this. I saw guano. I saw, whatever you see, and you put the time, you put the location, you get GPS when you can. You take pictures when you can. But what matters is that you wrote that down and you keep it, because this cave is different from this one. So I purposefully, in my classroom, there were 5 caves. Every cave had different stuff. So if they tried to go in one and they were like, oh, we saw 5 bats in here, and make up like 10 bats in that cave, well, joke's on you, because I only put bats in one of the caves. So great link to biodiversity and talking about communicating. Some of them set up teams on their own. I didn't tell them to work. They figured, they were like, oh, you go to that cave, you go to that cave.
Nice.
Trust each other. They had to communicate. So that's another lesson from the fields. A lot of times you're doing one piece of data collection and your teammates are doing everything else. So if you drop the ball on yours, you've messed everyone else up. So they naturally kind of figured that out. Or the next day I would tear the caves down, and we were in the lab and we were putting our data together. And a couple students didn't visit every cave. So they had incomplete data. And so then we talked about, can we go back to the cave? No, it's gone. If we were doing this, we went 4 hours to a cave, I can't go back. So you have to be careful how accurate you are and how organized you are. So there's tons of lessons.
A lot. Yeah.
So
awesome.
Compounding. And they're like, oh my gosh, can I write a blog about that? I'm like, yeah, you can. I didn't even think, I didn't plan for that, but that's perfect. So they start really kind of guiding everything. You just plant the seed, and then off they go. So those are only 2 things. I could talk forever.
No, that's huge. We'll have to do another episode in the future and talk about what's going on. You're getting me fired up to do science. That's only happened to me like 3 times in my life. So that's inspiring. I'm super into it. And I know that you've got a day of fun playing with the family. And as you look forward to 2019, I've been big on goal setting the last few years, short, middle, and long. And I'm hoping that maybe one day this will be one of the largest collections of teacher interviews and archives that'll be available for people as a resource. What are you hoping to do in the new year? And what are you getting excited for when January January rolls around just a few hours from now?
Yeah. So on Twitter right now, what's blowing up is the one word. And the one word that I've chosen for 2019 is further. So how can I push things further? How can I go further, whether it's physically or whether it's just in my classroom pushing my students, or in the classroom pushing myself or my colleagues, or the community members to get involved. I'm just looking for what's the next opportunity that's going to push what I do just a little bit further and push me to grow so that I can push my students and my colleagues to grow.
Man, that's everything, right? Further is everything. I love that so much. Becky Schnekser, thanks so much for joining us and talking on a few minutes on New Year's Eve about everything you've been doing. I like your whole vibe and the presentation and the way that I feel like you and me could get in a good verbal race because we can both go at a quick pace and we get excited. I love that. And my broadcast background's like, yeah. So thank you so much. And I wish you the best in getting further in 2019. We'll have to talk again. But thank you for being such an inspiring teacher and joining us to hype us up for the new year.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year, everybody. This is Inspiring Teachers. Got a whole new set of interviews coming very shortly. Thank you. And for now, class is dismissed.